Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Melinda Nusifora. When US President Donald Trump pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal in May, the fate of billions of dollars worth of business dealings was thrown into disarray. The United States has reimposed sanctions on Iran, which forbids any US company or subsidiary from trading with the country. It also threatens to penalise international companies if they do business with the oil-rich nation. Iran is already starting to feel the economic squeeze and has warned it may follow America's lead and withdraw from the nuclear peace process. In an effort to salvage the agreement and secure lucrative business dealings, the European Union has come up with a plan to circumvent the standoff. The EU says it will create a new financial mechanism to allow countries to continue trading with Iran without breaching US sanctions. It's referred to as a special purpose vehicle and could act as a middleman or buffer between the companies and Tehran. To discuss this further, joining us from our Ankara studio is Bozkurt Aran, a former Turkish ambassador to Iran, and Borzu Dargahi, who is a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council. Borzu, we're going to start with you. There are no details yet exactly what this plan is going to be, but if it was to eventuate, how would you see this working? Can you give us an example of how this could be achieved to circumvent the US sanctions?
Well, I mean, one of the ideas under discussion by the diplomats from the EU, China, and Russia is to have Iran essentially transfer its crude oil to Russia. Russia would then refine those petroleum products, give them to Europe, and then Europe would transfer goods in exchange for those petroleum products to Iran. So essentially setting up a kind of barter system.
It sounds like a bit of a complex situation. I'm going to bring you in now here, Bozkurt. You're sceptical about this. You say that this can't work. Why?
And totally negative is not possible, of course, because we don't know the details of the transaction, how they are going to set up this legal system. And it's going to be something quite serious, of course. I mean, it will be, they have to work out the details. It's going to be a legal new scheme of transactions between the banks. Today, the existing one, the SWIFT, the Society for Worldwide, whatever it is so difficult. It is controlled totally by the United States. And the United States is not totally prohibits the Iranian banks to have any kind of transactions within the system. So the EU is trying to set up a new system. And we don't know exactly how this is going to work. I totally agree with our colleague who says that it's going to be a barter system. It's going to be a barter system, but it will take some time to really know the details of the system.
Even though this is still in its early stages, we don't have the details yet, what we're seeing, even from this proposal, is that the US is really isolating itself from so many other countries that were staunch allies and trade partners. Bozkurt, can you tell me when we have seen another time when the US has really isolated itself like this? Is this unprecedented?
If you ask the question to me, of course it is unprecedented. I mean, but if you listen, or if you carefully study the speech of President Trump at the United Nations, it makes it very clear. And we say that we are rejecting the globalization and we are embracing patriotism. And even though the U.S. is the main culprit, I should say, they established today's architecture of the world order, still they are the ones who are opposing it now. And he's not very happy with the WTO. He's not very happy with the IMF. He's not very happy with the World Bank. And in the United Nations, he's totally neglecting it altogether. And he hopes that U.S. will be isolated.
however this mechanism is set up, whether it works, whether it doesn't work, is this really just a very important political statement? Is this a symbolic shift, a mood and a move away from dominance of the US dollar as far as international trade goes?
I don't know about dominance of the US dollar, but I think it is important to take a step back beyond the logistics of this particular mechanism, however it may pan out. There is this question. I spoke to one diplomat who is actually in New York involved in these talks. And he was saying to me, the important thing is not what the mechanism is going to be. The important thing is the fact that the EU, Russia, and China are making these plans without the US, making these huge major decisions. And I think that goes for a number of issues in the region. For example, you have Russia, Turkey, and Iran talking about Syria without the US. You recently had Turkey, Russia, Germany, and France talking about Syria without the US, not even bothering to put them in the loop at this point. And I think that just speaks to the isolation of the U.S. What Trump is doing, I'm not sure if it's based in any ideology. I think he's just probably has a very weak and kind of dysfunctional administration from everything that I've seen. And, various wacky ideas are getting in there. This sort of weird version of anti-globalism. Like they don't want globalism. Meanwhile, they're involved and interfering in every single country in the Middle East.
It's changing the outlook, isn't it?
I don't think there's anything consistent there. I don't think there's any thinking there. I think it's just various, and I even think that the anti-Iran stance, the harsh anti-Iran stance, is more about satisfying a very narrow domestic U.S. constituency in Washington, the think tanks, the bankrollers of the Republican Party, more than based in any kind of ideology. As Trump himself said, I think this Rouhani is a very fine man. I wouldn't mind meeting him,
The rest of the world, though, we're looking at here now, the EU aren't following America's lead. Could this be viewed as just the EU trying to mark time until we see what happens in the midterm elections? Is this a shallow attempt to appease Iran so that they don't walk away from the nuclear deal and they are happy to continue trading with other Western countries?
Maybe I should say a few words about the American system. The United States has created a political architecture that solely relies on coalitions. America was the country that built the coalitions around the world. It was United Nations, of course, the NATO, the relations with transatlantic relations, and the relations with Europe. Those were the important pillars of the whole thing. And of course, the NAFTA on the other side of the Atlantic. Now, America wishes that these coalitions is not serving the needs of the American people. So they are isolating, as my colleague has just said, isolating themselves from the coalitions, and they are putting an end to the coalitions. And at the same time, but the whole system relies on American, powerful economy. Now, as we go back, as we try to establish a new SWIFT system, that will be a competition, or maybe the competition is a harsh word, but the gap between the United States and Europe is widening. And that's quite important, of course. And to see that this coming is quite difficult. And on the Iranian case, of course, the nuclear deal and so forth, nuclear deal was established or signed in 2015. 3 years was quite important for all of us. But then all of a sudden, United States decided that this deal is not working for themselves in Middle East. And they think that, and the U.S. thinks that the Iranian ambitions in the Middle East is totally opposing the American interests there. And of course, secondly, I mean, on another pillar is the missile, the ballistic missiles. There is no article in the deal that prohibits the ballistic missile experimentations.
All right, I am going to interrupt you there and just put our final question now to you, Bozu. The United States has in the past penalised companies significantly for breaching US sanctions. Do you think that companies in the European Union will be willing to use this new mechanism? Is it too risky?
I think that there's a couple things. One, the effect of the sanctions, the effect of the U.S. Warning these companies not to do business with the Islamic Republic has already taken hold. So I think a lot of these companies, for example, if you're a big company, you go to your shareholders, CEO, say, we want to do business with Iran. There's going to be reputational and other risks. And you know, as a big publicly held company, you're going to have a hard time selling the company on a decision to do business with Iran. But I think that there's going to be small and medium-sized enterprises that don't have a lot of U.S. investment, that don't have a lot of stake in what the U.S. thinks of them. They will be more than willing, to use this mechanism. But when it comes to, for example, huge European companies, pharmaceuticals, manufacturing, and so on, they're going to be very reluctant. But they've already, I mean, in a way, the effect of the sanctions is already in place because they've already stepped back.
It's going to be very interesting to see how it all plays out. Gentlemen, thank you both for joining us here on Straight Talk.